Wolfclock Productions, Wolfclock here. You might know me from one of these things, and welcome to Beta and You, the cut content, fun facts, and trivia series. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at all of the different user-assigned eras to Portal 1's development. But before we do that, take a look at this over here, and if you could maybe help me out with this and subscribe, it would be much appreciated. Anyway, let's move on to the video. The first era of development for Portal 1 is referred to as the Prospekt era, and is referred to this way as the maps look similar in nature to Nova Prospekt from Half-Life 2. This era of development started sometime before July 1st of 2005, and went all the way up until May 17th of 2006, making it the longest era of Portal 1's development. The majority of the test chambers that are used in the final game were first made for Prospekt era. In fact, the only ones that we don't know about are Test Chamber 5, Test Chamber 9, and a couple of the escape chambers, which were likely made during later development eras. The portals in this era of development were light blue and purple. Despite the many screenshots that we have from this era of development, we actually do not know many things about it. For example, we are unsure as to whether or not GLaDOS was a character in this part of development, or if the player was simply acting on their own. What we do know about this era of development, however, is that the facility that the player was in was Combine Run. There are some speculative theories that there may have been multiple eras within what we refer to as Prospekt era. For example, some people believe that earlier points in development may have had a warehouse theme as opposed to a Nova Prospekt theme. However, we do not have enough evidence about this era in general to be able to say either way. Prospekt era ended around mid to late May of 2006, when Valve reorchestrated the entire game to have a more clean aesthetic. Portal 1's second era of development is one that we refer to as the early 2006 era. This era began around mid-May of 2006 and lasted until around late June of 2006. It is noteworthy as this is the first era that had an aperture-themed style to it. This era is noteworthy for still having some leftover Prospekt era assets in some of its chambers. For example, in Test Chamber 00, we can see that there is a prop in one of the areas that the player traverses, which is removed in all later versions. Some other noteworthy features are that this era was the first one to have aperture-style objects in it, which means for a little while, Valve was experimenting with how they wanted aperture-style to look. As a result of this, the doors and crates look very different in this era compared to later ones. The portal gun seen in this era is very different to the portal gun that we see in all later versions of Aperture. As you can see in this screenshot here, the portal gun from this era appears to be very similar in style to the gravity gun from Half-Life 2. This means that it was likely a remnant from late Prospekt era. We know that GLaDOS was added in this era of development. However, it is likely that the majority, if not all of her voice lines, were done by text-to-speech as opposed to Ellen McLean. Portal's third era of development, as dubbed by the community, is referred to as the Trailer era. This era of development took place from July of 2006 to mid-August of 2006. As the name suggests, this era of development was what was used for the Portal teaser trailer, as well as some of the footage in the Orange Box trailer. The Portal gun itself has been finalized. However, a lot of things about the Portal gun and the portals are still very different. For example, the animations on the portal gun, as well as the textures, are still in their early forms. The Half-Life 2 turrets have been replaced with Aperture Science turrets, which are currently using temporary voice lines that will later be replaced.
Firing. Searching.
Trailer era uses a new portal type referred to by the community as 1's portals, or fire portals. These portals are orange and blue. It is notable that, although the 1 portals are orange and blue, the swirl that appears when one portal is shot and the other one is inactive is purple, which is likely a remnant from Prospekt era. Although GLaDOS in-game was likely still text-to-speech, Ellen McLean had signed on to become GLaDOS' voice actress at this point. The Fizzlers now have a line effect going through them. This will be changed later on in development. Cubes have been finalized during this era of development, and a lot of other assets have received their final styles. However, they will be iterated upon with actual textures being added, as Trailer era oftentimes only uses ambient occlusion bakes. The behind-the-scenes sections seen in the escape section in the final game are seen in this trailer. However, they appear to be much earlier on in development, using brush-based crushers instead of the ones that we see in the final game. The aesthetic is also very different, using a lot of orange, It is believed that the ending to this era is the so-called James Bond laser GLaDOS battle, as referred to in the Portal GDC talk. Portal's fourth era of development is referred to by the community as the Gamescom Leipzig era, and is referred to as such because, of course, it was showcased at Gamescom in Leipzig in 2006. This era took place around late August, as the Games Convention in 2006 was held from August 24th to 26th, and went on until mid-September. This era replaced the Prospekt-style elevators with a later, more aperture-y version. Because this era has gameplay footage as opposed to just SFM footage, we can actually see some of the differences in gameplay. For starters, we can see that the portal gun itself still uses a purple texture for the orange portal. Many assets that were previously only ambient occlusion bakes now have actual textures. For example, the buttons on the floors, as well as the doors, now have textures to them. Turrets have their finalized voice lines at this point in time. The ending to this era is one that we refer to as the Zen ending, and many pieces of this ending can be found in the Escape 01 test chamber map, found in the game's leaked files, under the name Steaming Refuse. Our next era of development is referred to as the X06 era, and is referred to as such because it was showcased at the Xbox 2006 showcase, which took place on September 29th and 30th of 2006. The X06 era introduced swirl portals, which replaced our previous vine/fire portals. It is noteworthy that although the portals have changed yet again, the swirl that appears when portals open and close was blue for both portals. This was a carryover from the unified purple swirl effect that we discussed earlier. This was the point in time where the wall lines had become ant lines that we see similar to the ones in the final game. However, it is noteworthy that in some footage, these ant lines are always orange as opposed to being blue when turned off and orange when turned on. It is unknown what the ending to this era would have been. It's likely that it was something in between what we had from the Gamescom Leipzig era and the following era, December 2006. Our next era of development is referred to as the December 2006 era. I believe you can figure out when this era of development had taken place. The reason why this era exists is because we have a full copy of the game's files from December of 2006, thereby giving us a sneak peek into what the game was like at this point in time. The Portal mod, Portal Project Beta, uses the assets from December 2006 and compiles them together in a playable build. This playable build is online and can be played by anyone. That being said, however, there are a couple of differences between the actual December 2006 Portal build and the version that was made for Portal Project Beta. The most notable one that I can think of is the fact that the cameras are different. In the actual December 2006 build, the cameras were a Half-Life 2 styled one, whereas in Portal Project Beta, they are ambient occlusion bakes on the final models. One of the noteworthy additions from this era of development are actual particle systems being used, as opposed to code-based particles which were used in previous versions. This can be seen most easily on the portals themselves, which now use actual particle systems. In X06 era, portals did not have any particles coming off of them. This is also the first era where we get to see the new fizzlers, which look very similar in style to the Portal 2 fizzlers. This era is another long one, as it lasted up until about March of 2007. Our seventh era of Portal development is referred to as the Game Informer era, and is referred to as this as there are a couple of videos from Game Informer that showcase it off. We are unsure of the exact time frame for this era. The videos that are uploaded to YouTube are from March 10th of 2007. However, this was after our following era, so it's more likely that this was either January or February of 2007, and is almost identical to the December 2006 build. However, there are a couple of notable differences. To start things off, the door state textures are different in this build. In previous builds, they were green and red. However, in this one, they have a more finalized style, with the blue and orange, as seen in the final game. The only other main difference is that Test Chamber 18 is different to any version that we have, from before or after this era. Our next era of development is referred to as the GDC era, as it was what was showcased at GDC 2007. This era began in early March of 2007 and lasted up until around late June or early July. This era was the first one to see us using the finalized Portal models. However, with that being said, the particles were still that of the swirl portals. The metal walls were scratched up, as opposed to the final game where they are much smoother. The portal gun view model has a left hand on it. Finally, the final camera models are in the game. They are using an ambient occlusion bake and are very small. Our 9th era of development is referred to as the E3 era, as it was the version of Portal that was shown off at E3 of 2007, and it started around early to mid-July of 2007. The portals themselves have been finalized, now using their final particles that are seen in the final game. The textures and animations on the portal gun have been finalized as well. However, there is still a left hand visible on the view model. Chell is now the protagonist, replacing the earlier temporary male model. However, the male model is still seen on the main menu. The final elevator and elevator shaft has been added in. However, they are still using earlier textures. The cameras are now using their final size, but are still ambient occlusion, save for a couple of black bits. And now we come to our final era of Portal's development, referred to as the pre-retail era. This was from August to October of 2007. Many of the differences are very minor and minimal. However, we will go through some of them right now. For example, the previously teal or green-blue lights that are seen on various objects have been changed. First off, they changed to a deeper blue, which is not seen in the final game, before becoming the final lighter blue that we do see on all of the models. The crosshair has finally been changed from the Half-Life 2 style one to the final one that shows the portal swirls around the crosshair. Finally, one of the last changes that was ever made to Portal was the glow seen on top of the portal gun when shooting a blue portal went from a lighter teal to the final deeper blue that we see in the final game. That just about does it for all the different eras of Portal 1's development. In total, we had 10. If you'd like to learn more about these different eras, I've provided a link to the Portal beta server in the description. Thank you all very much for watching. I have been Wolfclock, and I will see you all in the next video, whenever it may be.